With the release of the finale, all the episodes are now out, and that means my complete thoughts for every episode are mostly finalized, and I feel a little more comfortable ranking every episode. Note that my opinions are subject to change, and that this is, of course, just my opinion. They may or may not line up with yours, and that's perfectly fine. One last thing I want to make clear is that I like all these episodes, and there's not a single one I don't like. Even the number 8 spot is one I like a lot, and I'd end up giving it a 9 out of 10. With that being said, let's get into the ranking.
What are you things?
Remember, I love every episode, so even though this one is like a 9 out of 10 for me, it's still in last place. My main complaint is that it just felt like nothing was really going on, right? It's mostly just the episode that's like, hey, this is the solver. Look, it's pretty scary and dangerous. This is our villain. That's the role of the episode, to establish the solver as a threat. And that's a good role for an episode. It makes sense. It's just not as enjoyable or interesting as the others. Eldritch J was really cool and she put up a fight, but unlike later fights, it wasn't as action-packed and focused more on manipulation to Uzi, which is great once again, but not as cool as seeing stuff like Doll vs. Uzi or the final fight, though that doesn't mean it's bad. I also quite like how the episode gave Thad a much bigger role, because he is one of my favorite characters. V didn't appear much, something you will notice the bottom two have in common, though there is one exception higher up. Overall, it's not as action-packed as some of the others, but it's a very serviceable episode for what it's trying to do. Highlights of this episode include Eldritch J, V showing her first sign of being more than just a psychopath, and Khan starting to become a better father.
Crikey, what a bounding hump to ruffle!
Now, I know Yagster absolutely hates this episode, but personally I don't mind it. Obviously, I like them all, so that's not saying much, but I still like this episode overall, and while it may not have been the best one, I can probably say with confidence that this episode is the funniest. It was really nice to have an episode to see a look into the history of disassembly drones and their past. Tessa was a really cool character, and seeing the differences between past and current versions of characters is always nice, especially with the big difference between V. That brings me to my first complaint though. For an episode being so integral to V's trauma and history, we didn't see a lot of her. Granted, they got the point across and we finally understand why she's so aggressive towards the solver, so they didn't fail at it. But I just think the episode was more focused on that instead of Uzi. We got a deeper look into Jay and something always nice, especially Jay, who is in desperate need of something, and we get to see her attachment to Tessa, another character that of course was very entertaining. The problem with Maid V is most of the time she was a feral solver state, similar to Uzi from episode 4, and while that makes us understand why she was so scared of her at first, and after being reminded so vividly of it in her memory, it makes sense why she'd start to sympathize with Uzi more after it. So they get what they're trying to do accomplished with her, but we still don't see as much of her actual character, like personality, which is a contrast to her current front that she puts up. She has genuinely grown and developed in confidence and more, but she also exaggerates it and puts up a front, and now we see why. That being said, the glasses scene where she breaks out of it is super heartwarming and just absolutely adorable, so I'm glad we got some of it. Uzi as a crow was fine, but realistically she didn't need to be there for as much screen time as she got at least, and probably would have been better spent on Jay, Tessa, or V. Highlights of this episode include Sin being silly, V glasses scene, and getting a look into the manor.
Actually, it's gin rummy.
For an introduction, this is great. It establishes most of the characters that will be important, with some exceptions. It's decently long, so we get to see the world more, and gives us tons of mystery and suspense, making us want to see the next episode. Now, while that's great, and I'm glad this is the introduction to the series, it's not as entertaining as some of the future episodes. Not saying it's bad, quite the contrary. I'm just saying that the other ones are super good. And even so, this episode still stands strong above some like 2 and 5. The characters that are established well and is paced really well too. The problem I have with this episode is the comedy though. There are some hits, but there are quite a few misses too. This is probably the cringiest episode. They're trying to find the kind of comedy they wanted to do, so it's fine. See, but hearing Uzi say angsty teen was I didn't like that. That's the main thing though. Uzi's pretty cringe in the episode, even if there are some funny jokes from her. Everyone else is pretty funny and most of their jokes hit, whether it be Khan, N, J, Thad, or V. I also feel like I'm obligated to mention, since obviously they didn't have as big of a budget on later episodes, the animation is considerably worse than the ones that come later. The animation is considerably worse than the ones that come later. That may be bad to some people, and that may be something people don't like, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It's still quite good. V gets a decent amount of screen time here, and even if it's just her psychopathic front she puts on, which is nice, because it sets her up really well for her future development. The biggest strength this episode has, in my opinion, is the runtime. It's the longest and thus has the most time to flesh out the world and do what it wants to set up the story, which is a really big strength in this episode's favor. Highlights of the episode include V versus N and J versus Uzi fight scene, the scene with traumatized Khan leaving Uzi, and Uzi's interaction with N.
So, forgive and forget, or I'll get my dad to dock your frickin' grades! And you can't sit with us, Rebecca!
Wait, hear me out. I know this may seem a little low for the #1 fan favorite episode, and to be fair, this one, 4th place, and realistically 3rd, are all really close for me, so I wouldn't be too upset if someone switched those 3 around. And this is the one where the episodes start to get to like 10 out of 10 range. Like, genuinely, this episode is so good, it pains me I have to put it this low, just because I like the 4th and 3rd place slightly more. I promise you this episode is still peak in a 10 out of 10. Getting that out of the way, what do I not like about this episode? Well, nothing. There isn't really something I point out and I'm like, I wish that was different. V started to develop more, NX Uzi plotline was starting to come up, Doll was an amazing and mysterious villain. You finally got to see the solver powers in full effect, especially with Uzi unlocking them completely in the episode, which is so great. I wish Thad got a little more time, but I guess I'm fine with that. Lizzie was hilarious, V was hilarious. This one is the only one that gives 5 a run for its money with the funniest episode. Speaking of V, let's talk about her. This is when we really get to see, oh shoot, there's more to her than it seems, other than a short little section. And with V being my favorite character, that's a great thing to see. Personal biases aside though, even if most agree, it's time to talk about Doll. This is easily her best episode. You could see her clear motive and hatred for V, and you think, well dang, she's right, she has a reason to be mad. Maybe she's going a little too far killing innocent classmates to get in her way, but that's the point. Unlike Uzi, who was able to look past the disassembly drones for N, and later on the series V, Doll let her trauma consume her, and she stopped at nothing to get her way, murdering so many innocent worker drones just so she could get a good enough shot at V, and even then, she failed. She's super menacing, and the choice to make her speak Russian was, while an overlooked detail about her, is really cool and makes her so much better in my opinion. And Uzi versus Doll was one of the best fight scenes in the whole series, though there are some I like more. That's just how I feel about this episode. It's one of the best and I love it a lot, but there's just others I like more. Highlights of this episode include Lizzie and V's friendship, Uzi unlocking her solver powers, and of course the Doll fight.
Purple eyes. Hot topic.
This is another one I expect to not be completely agreed upon by the community, but I really love Cabin Fever. It almost took 3rd place, but I decided the next one is ever so slightly better. The main thing is, other than 6 and 8, this is an episode where V really gets to take the spotlight, and that's one thing I love about it a lot. Her camper outfit is just amazing. N's is a little but V's is great. This is something I don't hear a lot when talked about. This is something I don't hear talked about a lot with this episode, which is the aesthetic and also the environment of Camp 98.7 is probably one of the best in the whole series, and that makes this episode stand out so much more. And also helping this episode is the group of the campers, minor side characters who get a little character before being killed off. Makes this universe feel just more alive, even if they're not there for that long. Just seeing some of these campers we hadn't seen before makes it feel more like a real world. N is kind of Uzi's lapdog in this episode, and that's a common complaint that this episode gets, which I agree with. V is kind of completely in the right in the fact that Uzi is dangerous and they need to take action, but N refuses to let her go after her, and V almost dies, and he saves her, and he takes Uzi's side, which is crazy. And then after she kills all the campers, all he says to Uzi is just, don't do it again. Like, bro, she just killed people. Is that not a concern to you? Probably not one of N's best showings, but it is one of V's best. She's just so amazing in this episode, and I like how she kind of is in the right, but she doesn't just stop because it's hurting her relationship with N. Granted, she doesn't tell N anything, which is probably something that would have been good to do, but whatever. Uzi is also pretty good in this episode. It really sells the fact that she is an insane social outcast, and her being the villain of the episode was a really great choice considering she's the protagonist, so it's pretty unique. Overall, this episode does have some problems, mainly N. I'd like to outshine it so much that I think I can put this high. Highlights of the episode include Solver Uzi Massacre, The Campers, and V vs. Uzi.
Yikes. Someone's been busy.
This, along with episode 3, are probably the most well-loved episodes, and for good reason. This is probably the darkest and most horror-like episode out of them all, and it keeps hitting blow after blow after blow. This is the episode where Tessa being Sin is revealed, and holy crap, that's horrifying. Dull gets killed off in an extremely gruesome way, though some argue she was an underutilized character, which, yeah, I can see. N and Uzi's relationship takes a huge turn here, where N has to choose between who he thinks is his mother figure and the person who made him the happiest he's ever been. Obviously, he chooses Uzi, not sure that was a surprise to anyone, but damn, bruh. At least it was Sin, because if it actually was Tessa, I'd go on a rant about how stupid N was. The flashback scenes with Nori and Yeva and Mitchell really build up the story more in a meaningful way, and we get to see how Uzi and Doll are connected to the Solver, that being through their mothers, who are some of the first hosts. Seeing Yeva and Nori in action was great, and Mitchell is very lovable. But what came to surprise as many is Nori actually survived as a core and was hiding in cabin fever labs to try and find the patch to the Solver. Her chemistry with N is great because obviously it was. She's very similar to Uzi, so it makes sense that they naturally play off each other, and that goes for the fight too. See, when Uzi almost dies, Sin takes over, leading N and Uzi to have a fight in one of the best scenes in the whole series. It's so sick. Not to mention the way Sin plays with N's emotion and gets an upper hand the whole time is great. Like every time N is about to land a blow that could do a lot of damage or threatens to, Sin takes it head on since she's in Uzi's body, and she does it in a way where Uzi will die if the blow lands, leading N to have to save her while fighting her at the same time. Plus, Sin has other hosts, so it doesn't even need Uzi. Sin is an absolute master manipulator, and I love it. The episode keeps you in suspense the entire time in the best way possible. Highlights of this episode include the flashback scenes with Nori, Yeva, and Mitchell, the Tessa Sin reveal, and the Uzi vs. N and Nori fight.
Nah. Uzi? I trust you.
Now, this may come as a surprise to you guys because I've come out multiple times to say that this is the best episode, and before the number 1 spot came out, it definitely was. To be fair, they're really close, and I can see episode 6 becoming my favorite again anytime, but for now, it rests comfortably in second. The main reason I love this episode is, of course, V. V really gets her chance to shine, showing off the development she's gotten throughout the course of the series. She saves Uzi, and shows her more sympathetic tone towards her, which is something we don't see very often. This was her main climax or turning point in her arc, and while some might argue it was ruined because she lived, I say if you think that, you don't really understand V's character in the slightest. But while that's the main reason, let's go over the other things this episode does that makes it just so amazing. For one, the villains being so unique. This episode has more than one major villain, something not seen in many other episodes. For one, there's Alice and Bo. These are one-off villains, something that makes this episode more refreshing and unique compared to the others. Where to Doll, Sin, Jay, etc., this episode has Alice and Bo, and some others. Not only do Alice and Bo fill that role, they do it very well and have an important role in the story beyond that, being introduced from the idea of drones experimented on in the cabin fever labs, with Alice knowing Uzi's mom. Bo, on the other hand, we don't have an explanation for, but he still fits his role well. He clearly doesn't want to be doing what he's doing, and is just doing it for Alice, considering he's a baby being forced to cut open people and extract parts from them. And Alice is his mother figure, so he's doing it for her. Once he sees Alice is dead, he decides to sacrifice himself to save V from the Sentinels. This isn't just a sympathetic villain, this is a villain where we are actively rooting for to do the right thing, and despite the little time we have with him, it's sad to see him go. The other villains I need to talk about are the Sentinels. This is kind of a villain that has no moral compass, and it's just a machine doing orders. And the choice of raptor robots is sick. They're probably some of the scariest and coolest villains. Every second they're on screen, it just adds so much more suspense to the scene. And we are established early on how much of a threat they are, seeing the corpses of disassembly drones scattered by them, as well as the scene with them hunting and killing worker drones in the beginning with their stunning ability. We also see them take out Alice and Bo, as well as almost kill N. If it weren't for Tessa, N would have died here. Speaking of Tessa, while it's not revealed to be Sin yet, the audience can definitely tell there's something wrong with her. Well, it's not actually obvious. and I like that. She adds a great, morally gray character into the mix where you don't know what their intentions are or what really happened to get them this way. Last time we see them, they're a happy-go-lucky kid, and now they're a mysterious masked figure who wants to kill Uzi, which she says is for the good of the universe. This adds a great layer of depth onto N's character, and unlike V, who is morally good but forced into a situation where they have to do bad before it's revealed to be Sin, we really don't know what her morals are or where her intentions stand, and it pays off in my opinion when it's revealed to be Sin under the costume, even though I know some people don't agree with that. And of course, the Solver continues to play a big threat through all of this, and they managed to make this episode feel well-paced and natural. A truly amazing feat. There is a reason this one was my number one for so long, and can easily become my favorite at any time, with how close it is to the number one spot. But of course, it's not number one, so...
Dropped this.
Silly.
Call it recency bias if you want, but I've had time to think about it, and I can say that this is probably my favorite episode of Murder Drones. Of course, 6 might overtake it again, but they're really close. It's just this one has so much going for it. Let's go over the flaws, because yes, there are some. First, it's very fast paced, which might tick some people off, but personally I don't mind it too much because the things I cared about, mainly V, were done pretty perfectly and got the time they needed. And the other flaws are... well damn, I can't think of any. That's like my only problem with it. Sure, Kananori reunion is something I wish we did get, but there's nothing I wish they didn't do. Maybe I wish Jade got her arc and changed sides, but like what we did get with her wasn't half bad either. Though of course, let's get into what I did like. Songs amazing, animation top notch, characters phenomenal, some of their best showings, the fights absolutely the best in the whole series. Sin was absolutely terrifying this episode, and I could not be happier with the villain we got. This is also V's best episode, and was exactly what she needed. I say it perfected her. Full video I made on that, I'll link now. And Uzi are officially together, which is of course adorable, and almost all characters got their time to shine. Kananori maybe could have gotten more, but they're still there and get some development. That and Lizzie as well. Almost every main character got their happy ending, besides the antagonists, that being Doll, Jay, and Sin, even if Jay and Doll aren't exactly evil. Actually, Doll kind of killed her classmates to get petty revenge, so okay, she's pretty evil. But not like Sin level. Disassembly drones were forced into the scenario, so I'll give them a little bit of a break, but Doll's just being petty. Anyway, they didn't get a happy ending, but all our heroes did. And one of those characters is V, so I'm very happy and satisfied as a fan with this ending, and the heroes that everyone was attached to made it through. Couldn't have asked for a better ending to my favorite show. So that's my ranking. Once again, I love all these episodes, and this is my favorite show. Also, if you are wondering where I'd put Intermission, which is the fan project, probably either above or below episode 3, likely below, which is a pretty good spot considering even the weakest episode in the show is a 9 out of 10 in my opinion. Made a video on that too. But what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Make sure to let me know in the comments below, and while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out my other videos on Murder Drones. I got quite a few for you, as well as some more cooking up in the future, like a video on Jay. But that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!